Hello and welcome to another episode of Words with Myself.
Most people are quite unaware to the extent that momentum plays in their life, whether positive or negative. And the odd thing about momentum is that you can't really feel it until it's in full effect. For instance, you may be in a downward spiral. You may have had something happen to you that threw you off tilt, and then because you were affected by what had happened, you then started making worse decisions. Maybe you had a bereavement, or maybe you lost your job, or maybe something bad happened. And because of the anger, frustration, and upset, you then began to make worse decisions, which meant that the scale and impact of that thing that happened grows exponentially. For instance, because you lost your job, maybe through no fault of your own, but it still knocked your confidence, so you weren't able to get another job. And because you weren't able to get another job, you became depressed, and it really took a hit to your confidence. That impacted your relationship, and maybe you then lose your relationship because you're moping around the house and you're depressed and you're sad and you're unemployed, and then you lose your relationship. So on top of all that, you also have to deal with the fact that you've lost the intimacy that was in your life. You've lost a close relationship. You've lost a support system. And it slowly mounts up to a dangerous level. It can happen really quickly and escalate very quickly in this sort of downward spiral where one event suddenly becomes something that makes things exponentially worse. And this also applies for making things exponentially better. You may be in a rut and be depressed and upset, and then you apply to a job and you get the job, or you get an interview and you turn up to the interview and you do well at the interview, and then you get the job and that makes you feel better. You then start socializing with different people, you then meet different people, that brings you out of your rut, you start taking up hobbies or being more social, and things can get better exponentially in the other way. But what happens is we tend to feel like things will be this way forever, whether good or bad. If things are bad, they're going to be bad forever. And if things are good, we take them for granted and expect them to be good forever. But that isn't how life works. Things go between the ebbs and flows of life. Things get worse and things get better. People often think about a stable person as somebody who has it all together and who, everything in their life is good and positive. They're employed, they've got a job, they've got friends, they've got a life, and that means that they're stable. But stability actually comes from adaptability, not rigidity. It's not being fixed in a state, it's being able to recover quickly. And oftentimes, the person who is most stable is not somebody who is trying to maintain or keep something controlled. It's that when something shifts out of range, they are able to scale back really quickly. If, for instance, you lose your job, somebody who doesn't let that affect them, somebody who doesn't take it as a personal attack and just goes, okay, I've lost a job, I need to move on to the next one, I need to find another employment, I need to upskill and create market value for myself. Someone who, as cliche as it may sound, when they are knocked down, they get up again. And not just get up again, but they get up again quickly. They don't wallow for too long. A lot of people, when something bad happens, it really affects them, and it affects them for a long time. And typically, that has a perpetual effect where it gets worse and worse and worse the longer that you are in it. And it's also why people are able to make such dramatic change once they hit rock bottom, because they've had all of this momentum spiraling them down, and they finally got to a place where they're like, enough is enough. Something needs to change here. And, sooner or later they start making a few decisions that change the course, and they start, trying to swim upwards, trying to push towards the surface. And they start finding that, the more good they do, or the more good they try to do, the better things get. And, just by a little bit of conscious effort, they are able to recover. And most of the time, recover better than they ever were. But you don't want to wait until you get to rock bottom. You don't want to wait until things have gotten so bad that it requires this drastic recovery, because that's a lot of time, energy, and investment that it takes on recovering from all of the distance that you've dropped. Whereas if you're able to course correct quickly, then it doesn't take as much effort. It doesn't take as much energy. It doesn't drag you down as much, because rather than allowing yourself to sink, you've pulled yourself up very quickly. And that doesn't mean not going through what you need to go through. That doesn't mean rushing your grieving process or your healing process. It means not doing things that are going to make it worse in the interim. If you are suffering, if you are hurt, if you need time out, then that's fair enough. Take that time. Take all the time you need in order to heal in a constructive way. But there's no point in self-sabotaging and destroying the good things that you do have in your life because something hasn't gone your way, or something didn't work out, or you were caught off guard by something that happened that was painful and unexpected. If you allow yourself to then sort of sit there and go, life's not fair, I should have had this should have happened, I don't get why this has happened, you put yourself in this victimhood seat, and then you begin to see all of these things that are happening to you, that you are suffering, and it quickly becomes a race to the bottom. Once you sit in that victimhood space, it just debases yourself and you become completely lost, and you start making worse decisions and harming yourself in ways that you shouldn't, and doing things that you shouldn't or that you know are wrong because it helps soothe you or it helps make you feel better. But those choices for short-term liberation become long-term consequences. They become things that send you down the wrong path. And the longer you walk down that path, the harder it becomes to get back. Because at some point you're going to go, well, I've come all this way, I've got to go all the way back, and that's just to get back to where I was. And that's very disheartening for people, especially when you're dealing with somebody who is high performing, or they have very heavy ambitions or goals. A good example is fitness or health. It can be where somebody gets sick and then they have some comfort food because they're ill, and then that sends them off track of their diet, and then they just get out of the pattern of eating good, and then they stop going to the gym, and it really quickly spirals out of control to the point where they feel like they have to now lose all of this weight that they've put back on, and that's just to break even. That's not even the high point or where they want to be, that's just to get back to where they were. But the longer you stall out, the longer you allow yourself to wallow, the harder that becomes. It doesn't get any easier. It just gets worse. And that's why it's such a difficult problem to solve, because the longer you allow it to go on, the harder it is to get out of. And if you stay there for too long, it can feel impossible to ever recover. But it is. It's just a case of momentum. And if you spiral downwards, you can spiral upwards again. What is incredibly useful is to understand things like your triggers, your patterns, and your habits. I feel like there is a certain structure that looks like an upside down pyramid, and everything rests on one point. And these are your habits, for instance. If one thing at the bottom can be done, then you can start stacking things on top. For instance, for me, if I'm eating right, then I have the energy to go to the gym. If I'm doing well at the gym and I'm working out often, then I feel better in myself. That allows me to perform better at work. If I'm performing better at work, then I have more energy and I feel less burdened. So I can take up more extracurricular activities, or I can socialize, or it gives me confidence to pursue other things or take a risk or do something outside of my primary job. But then you can see how this is a delicate process because, maybe, for instance, like now it's the Christmas period. And typically, over the Christmas period, people go, right, there's all this food and feasting and partying going around. I'm going to do that for Christmas because it's Christmas. Why aren't we going to go enjoy it? But then that sends them off the path of all the bits that they were doing. All that hard work they put in the year suddenly goes out the window because it's Christmas. And then Christmas becomes New Year. And then New Year, maybe people go, oh, I'm going to make my New Year's resolutions, and they start January, and that's a fresh start in January, and they go ham from January to whenever, and they manage to recover quickly because they realise the festive period is done, and they want to start working on their year and they want to hit the year running. And typically, a few years ago, this is the same kind of pattern I used to follow. But the problem is, my birthday is in January. So then it used to push the boat out a little bit. You know, it'd be, oh, okay, well, you got Christmas and then New Year. Oh, then it's my birthday. Oh, then it's my friend's birthday. And there was all of these exceptions. And it would keep me off the path. It would just keep extending that window of being off track past a limit where it felt pointless to even start now. Like, I'd lost that January New Year momentum, and because it had become, the end of January and I still hadn't started work on my New Year's resolutions or stuff like that, it kind of all went out the window and it just become just another year. And I know it sounds silly, but it's literally that pivotal. For me, everything rests on me eating right and getting enough sleep. If I'm eating right and getting enough sleep, everything gets perpetually better. I get better energy, so I can do more with it. I can go to the gym, and going to the gym gives me more energy still. And it also helps me to sleep. And it also means that I'm more incentivized to give myself good fuel. And then it means that I'm performing better at work because I'm getting up early and going to the gym. And then when I perform better at work, I feel better in myself and I have more energy. I'm not lethargic or bored or brain foggy or whatever it is. And just things begin to get exponentially better. And you have to find out what pattern it is for you. What chain of events starts you spiraling up? What builds momentum for you? Because it probably won't be the same thing as what works for me, but there will be something for you. And it may just be that they are the same things in a different order. Maybe for you, you need to start going to the gym, and that makes you want to eat better, and that makes you do better at work, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be those things. It's just creating this idea in your head of what is the building blocks for a healthy life for you. What allows you to feel the best version of yourself? What are the components of that? And what are the dependencies between them? Because once you have that figured out, then any time something goes wrong, or you find yourself in a downward spiral, or you find yourself not doing those things that you know you need to in order to feel the best, then you can begin to go, okay, well, I know that I need to do this. And when I do this, it makes this feel better, or it allows me to do this. And all of those things start clicking into place. So when something does go wrong, or something doesn't go your way, or something bad does happen to you, you can then have your downtime period. You can stay conscious of not doing the things that self-sabotage you. But even if you do, you can go, well, I understand how to reset quickly. I need to make sure that these things are in place before I do anything else. Because if I'm not eating right, if I'm not sleeping, if I'm not exercising, then how can I expect myself to do new things or pull myself out of this rut? How can I expect myself to take on new challenges? Because that momentum will either carry you down the path that you want to go down, or it will send you spiraling down. It's your choice. Thank you for listening.